right? And that's why there are two great visions that underpin all like Taoist philosophy, all alchemical practices. The first vision is that you are part of the greater whole, right? You are part of, and once you understand that you are part of, well, you are fed by the universe, right? And what that really means is that you don't make your heart beat, you don't make yourself grow. You grow because you are part of, and because the energy of the universe, right, descends in such a way that we can be here, right? So being part of is very organic. And when you want to play with that metaphor that you are part of, the easiest way is to understand the Tai Chi, which means the stem of a cherry, because they know, right, that you are part of a greater whole and that you're a cherry. One of my favorite things about being a cherry or being a plum or a peach or any fruit you decide to pick in your meditations is that the pits are all the same, which I really love, right? So when you get a bowl of cherries, all the pits are the same, right? Because they're all made by great nature. So when you're looking for the pit, you're really playing with those 5 elements. You're playing with that, hidden 5, like the third hand, right? Which really makes the pit. So how is the pit made? It's really made by temperature, by season, by hours, by, consciousness of something separate from everything else, right? It's great nature makes the pit, right? But the overlay is very personal. So a lot of times people say on the inside we're very different, on the outside, no, on the inside we're the same, and on the inside we're different, on the outside we're the same, but it's the other way around. It's on the inside we're really all exactly the same. Everyone gets the same number of organs, everyone gets the same glands, everybody basically is playing with the same geography, right? But on the overlay, well, everyone's born different seasons. So if you're into wines, you know that some years are great and some years aren't so great, right? Some years have blight, some years are just like prosaic, right? So keep in mind, great nature gives you the seasons, the temperature, the hours. It gives you the map, right? And that's why a calendar is a map of great nature. The second great alchemical principle is its polarity, which is that you're separate from everything else and it's personal. It's only about me, right? So once it starts getting personal, that's where really all the great practices of esoteric wisdom, right, is sort of manipulated, because it's all about what can I do, right? So first you're here because nature puts you here. Then all of a sudden you realize I'm running out of gas. I'm getting tired. I'm angry. I'm having issues. So now it becomes very personal. What do I do? So these are the two great polarities. You belong to the greater whole and you're separate from, right? You're an individual and it's all about your own being. So when I play for the first one, I go for really building the character of nature, because that's what allows me to be here. But the second one, I like to change the metaphor. So rather than thinking that I'm a fruit on a tree, which implies that I'm part of something greater, I move into being a car or a house or an instrument, at which point the whole narrative shifts into how do I tune it? How do I play it? How do I fix it when it's broken, right? What do I do because I have to live in it, right? So that starts self-cultivation, right? And so the narrative really of mystical practice is to mediate those two, right? To start with knowing that there's you're being part of, you're being separate from, and how do I deal, right? So that's the Trinity. When you make a braid, you always need 3 strands. Those are your 3 gunas. Those are your first nature, your second nature, your like east and west, and then that third piece, how do I deal? Right? How am I going to make it all work? The product is the braid. And that's why when you start learning all these maps, the goal is eventually it's a math game. That's why I really wanted to build this calendar on math, because it's all about math. It's all about know how to measure up. If you want magic, measure up, right? Biggest difference from luck and magic is consistency. So everyone gets lucky. Right? Once in a while you get lucky and you get just the right temperature, just the right day, just the right food, just the right, and you just get lucky, right? And that's a good game because something has to inspire you. And the universe is, very mystical and magical and full of inspiration. So you get lucky, right? But luck does not mean that you can access it whenever you want, right? And that's why all these practices are built on technique, right? Learn techniques, because if you have some good techniques, well, you can access what you want when you want it. So yoga is really, for me, it isn't a colonial narrative, that's very, it is of our era to think that, things are colonial and paternal and patriarchal, and that also that yoga belongs to the monastic traditions, right? Yoga is not about a monastery, right? Most yogis, just like most rishis, were out of control, right? And pretty fierce and pretty dangerous. And generally when you would, see some of these people, you cross the street because magic is very potent and very dangerous. And so now if you really know how to measure up, you want to be good because goodness is very powerful and it measures up. On the other hand, not everybody measures up because everybody is flawed and that stuff. And so you can be powerful and still not completely measure up, which I don't think anybody really can. But the goal is to know that if you have techniques, if you have ways to measure up, there's no reason you don't get what you want. Right? So I do yoga for that. I'm not interested in being a yogi, but I'm interested in being a well-adjusted human being and not losing my mind in a body. And for me, it was interesting because I did an interview with Elena Barr recently, and she was saying how when we talked about 10 years ago, one of my big goals, she always remembered what one of my big goals was. I'm going, oh my God, what did I say? Because, you're making up things all the time. And so I said, so what did I say? Right? And she said, oh, you want to be a good mother. And I was like, well, obviously, because I had kids. So, the goal really is for me to be good, right? And so yoga was a good technique to use in my repertoire. Now, yoga is a very loaded word. It is like saying music, right? And so, it's not that my goal is to become a great musician. My goal is to have great joy and know how to play my instrument, right? My goal is not to be a yogi. My goal is to be a human being, right? Taking advantage. I have a mind, a body, and a breath, and that I'm going to leverage it to be good and get what I need and get what I want and do the best I can. Yogis were never concerned about their bodies. So they were concerned, but not in the way we think, right? It wasn't about having a great body. It was about having a body that you don't lose your mind in, right? Because it's very hard to be in a body. And in the old days before anesthesia, right? Thank God that there's a lot of soma and a lot of, like medicines that people were taking because you have a tooth abscess and you want to kill yourself, right? And the body is hell when things are broken. So it is very hard to be in a body. And the goal really of yoga was, at least hatha yoga, was to have techniques so that you don't lose your mind in it. Right? So the goal isn't the perfection of the body, the goal is perfection of the mind, right, in so many ways. And so, when I sit there and try to define a lot of, the yoga, I think everyone has body-centric work. Everyone knows how to do stuff, right? And it really doesn't matter what kind of yoga you do. It doesn't matter if it's gym, if it's Pilates, if it's running, if it's it just matters that it's done well, right? It doesn't matter what language you speak, as long as you can conjugate your verbs, right? As long as you can be understood. And then, of course, you don't own a language, and this is why I try to teach this in the Katonah material. You don't own a language when you can conjugate the verbs. You own a language when you can articulate a metaphor, right? Because now it's implied that you can conjugate your verbs, right? It's implied that you have enough sense in a language that you're going to be understood for past tense, present tense, future tense, fairy tale sense, whatever reality sense you want to play with. You have to be able to articulate a language, right? But then the concepts, right, you don't really own until you can be conceptual. So I really think it's very important to understand how to play with metaphor and be conceptual and know that the goal isn't to do yoga. The goal is to bake a great cake, right? And you don't bake a great cake just because you're lucky. You bake a great cake because first you're literate and you can read the directions. So literacy is where a lot of this game begins, right? So literacy, right? Calendars are canons of personal religion, right? Canons are also calendars of organized religion. So when you belong to religion, the way you know is you show up on their calendar, right? So if the calendar says it's Christmas and you show up for Christmas, it's a clue, right? If the calendar, is designed to really bring you into community of others that are going to use time in the same way, right? So when the Vedas, when the Brahmins, doing the Vedas are trying to figure out how do we design the fire altar, right? Like, what's the design for it? Like, how do we design it, right? And so they were told, well, you design it on, well, I'm going to change it into the English calendar, but 365 days, right? And then they had the exact number of hours in those days. So you design it on time, right? Because time is the canon of life. It's like, here you are, you have a certain amount of time. What do you do? Okay? When somebody is worried about what they want to do, the best thing is handle time in the present, right? So the moment, right? So first, always know everyone gets 24 hours in a day. That is a huge dialogue, and that is really the core of all ritual and all practice. Use your time well, right? Mediate time. So I build these calendars because by virtue of a calendar, I can have a big picture, I can have a detail, right? I can see the lay of the land. So what is the land? It is the body of the year, right? And you can dress it up, you can dress it down, you can diminish it, you can make a great year of wine, right? So you have to know you're getting 1 year, right, on a calendar. And that's why I build it, because codify. If you know how to codify things, well, then you own a tremendous amount of power, right? And what do you want to codify is how you spend time, how you want to spend time, what you're going to do with your time, because that's all you have, right? Nobody gets anything else but time and space. So the calendars are built on the template of great nature. That's why it's designed like every other calendar. It has your 12 months. It has your, 365 days. When you're talking about a fire ritual, which is, the great altar that they were building to fire, well, what does that really mean? You have 3 fires in your body. Okay. So this is what you're ritualizing, 3 fires, right? You have the fire of desire that you wake up, right? That you're alive. So that's the primal desire that I am here, I am in a body, that light bulb goes on, and that's your first fire. Then you have fires of desire, right? And that always moves through speech, your ability to articulate, your ability to get applause, right? And then you have fire of the mind, right? So all these are your fires that you can ritualize, but they're all ritualized in time. Okay? So use a calendar, right? It's a fun game. So that piece is pretty basic. I don't tell you too much about a calendar. It's yours, right? If you make dates and you don't show up, it's on the calendar. You'll know something about yourself. People lie. Bodies don't lie, right? Minds make up a lot of things. Minds believe lots of things. The reason you get a map is so that a map overrides your mind, right? So when my mind tells me if I make a left turn, right, I'm going to get here, but actually on the map, it's not over there. Well, a map would help me to let go of that belief, right? Because it allows you to see something bigger than yourself. So what are your big siddhas, the big powers you want to develop? One of them is power perception, right? So see the big picture, see the detail. All my maps, the templates I build them on, first it's a regular map, right? But then I code them with that magic square, right? And the reason I like to play with magic square, and I want to break down the magic square a bit, and I know at about 12, 15, we will start practice, right? So Olivia is going to keep me honest, right? But if you look at all the calendar parts, they're all built on the magic square. And the magic square is a template. It's basically a tic-tac-toe board, okay? And if you know Western, like magical traditions, right? Durer, amulets, right? All the numbers game, the Arabic numbers, the Hindu numbers, are all belong to the concept of magic squares. They're Sudoku, right? So people are doing it all the time, right? People love playing games. And before you had computer games, people played number games, card games, and cards are the codes, right? And so then you make them into tarot cards, right? But they're all just number codes, right? The reason I like to play the numbers is because language can fool you, right? Because like if you talk about a bridge in German, I think a bridge in German is female, but a bridge in Spanish is male. So your brain already just has different connections with a bridge, right? If you come from one of these cultures, than if you come from a culture where a bridge is neutral. It's like, what is that all about? So language has all this cultural flavoring in it. Numbers don't. Numbers don't. And that's why I play with the numbers. I play Magic Square. I can teach the same diamond body by teaching it in baseball, right? But that would mean that half the world wouldn't understand it, right? You can teach it in Kabbalah and understand the numbers that way, but if you don't speak Hebrew, honestly, you're not doing Kabbalah, because you have to vibrate out the patterns of the letters, of the vowels, and know why you're playing with portals and why you're playing with consonants. Like, vowels are always the doors and consonants are always the building blocks. And so you'd have to know all this other stuff, but a number is always a number. 1 is always a 1, 2 is always a 2, right? So the number game is very appealing, right? Because it allows you to add up, it allows you to subtract, it allows you to organize and orient and not get lost, right? Because if it doesn't add up, it's wrong, right? If you go to buy a shoe and you know your shoe size is 8.5 and they offer you 12, you know it's wrong, right? And it still doesn't mean maybe it's a European size. Maybe I have to try it on. Then I have to really recalibrate what I think about sizing. But a number should give you a reality that is its own portal, right? So Magic Square, right? I learned the Magic Square probably about 17 years ago. Before that, I used to teach a lot by teaching baseball, home, second, first, third, infielder, outfielder, pitcher, right? 8-fold sphere around me, and the pitcher in the center, 9, an aegon. So I understood how I could organize in space. When people would ask me, like, well, how'd you figure it out? The way you figure out anything is someone sitting in front of you not understanding something, and you're trying to find a way that they can understand. And that's why once you own a language, you can go, well, do you understand the mechanics of a car? And then we can talk about a car. Or do you understand baseball? Or do you understand skiing? Right? Because once you've been someplace, you should be able to describe it again. Right? So that's all part of this numbers thing. So what I was going to say before I went off my little tangent is every square is built on that magic square of the tic-tac-toe board, the 3x3 magic square, right? And all the numbers are put in the position of where they would fit, right, on a typical magic square. So it's all done by reduction. If you're playing with like the number 26, well, 2 plus 6 equals 8, it will be put in the 8 position. If it's the number 12, 12 is 1 plus 2 is 3. It will be put in the 3 position. So eventually it's a game to know that, the family of a number. Now, anybody who is a mathematician knows, and even people who aren't, they know the family of the 9s, right? They love the family of the 9s because everything adds up to 9, right? 63, 9, 54, 9, 45, 9, and you always know 9 is in this multiple narrative, right? Well, what does that mean, right? What it means is that if you take 9 people, right, you now have an aegon. And if you give one of them the character of 1 and one of them the character of 2 and one of them the character of 3, right, and you define them, like put on their costume, I'm a 3, I'm a 2. Well, 2 would be very polarity, right? And a 3 would be always mediating. Well, now you've got your gods and your archetypes, but just numbered, right? As opposed to deities that then people forget, but they're metaphors, right? But, if it's 1, it's 1, right? If it's 7, 7 people huddled together, right? So all these different things are coded in numbers. So eventually, if you laid out the whole year, you would see the snake of the year, how the number of the year moves through. And if you put 4 years together, you see how they snake differently because every year has a different character, right? So that's why for the Chinese, they'll have animal names, right? But they don't serve you if you're not of their tradition, right? Because anyway, you'll mangle the metaphor. A Chinese dragon has nothing to do with a Western dragon, right? So when all of a sudden a Westerner is now going to play with the Chinese dragon, well, they have to know a little more than just it's a dragon, right? But a number, no, you don't have to know any more than it's a number, right? So number game, right? What is the Enneagram, right? Or what is this magic square? So for the people who don't know this, I'm just going to break down really quickly for you. If you want to visit America, get a map of 50 states, right? And then lay down on the floor, take a look. No, look at that, lay of the land, right? Now, of course, a map is never the territory. So if you don't really love maps, but you like food, right? Instead of thinking about a map, think of a menu. The menu is not the meal, but if you can read that menu, you have a lot of choice. And what is the goal of practice? Power. And you are powerful when you have choice. You are powerful when you can look at that menu and say, oh, look at that. That spelled chicken. Right? And this one spelled fish. So the first great literacy is that you can take a code and pull it off a page. Right? So knowing how to read these is code breaking. Right? And when you can take a code off a page, then you get this big magic of, look at that, it means something. So this code, and it's Sudoku game, if you look at all the numbers, right, all the poles, polarities add up to the number 10. Right? So if there's a 1 on top, there's going to be a 9. If there's a 2 on the other side, there's going to be an 8. If there's a 3, you're going to find its diagonal will be a 7. If there's a 4, it's going to have a 6. So all of a sudden, you're going to look at that. Oh, if I just made a line, right, I would get all these 10s. I get a pole. So a pole, remember, can be a pencil and eraser, right? 2 ends of the same stick, but they're not the same, right? So when you start looking at these, that is part of the code. I teach this guy that I totally adore, Marco in Italy, and when he was first learning this magic square, first I tell people, learn it by follow the dots. Just go from 1 and follow the dots to 2, and from 2 go to 3, and from 3 go to 4. And if you follow the dots, you're going to see a very certain pattern, right? You're going to see half of the whole once you get to 5. You're going to see the yin, and then eventually you can add the yang. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Half, 2 halves, 10 is a whole. But the big game eventually is there's a 5 in the middle that makes what we call in this map the magic constant. And the magic constant is the number 15, right? And 15 really means Trinity. Half, which is one hand, half, which is the other hand. But then once you put it together, you don't just get 2 hands, you get sound, you get the space between, you get the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts, right? So 15 includes the 3rd hand, the one in the middle, right? So this map is the same thing as the Sri Yantra. Okay? So people see the Sri Yantra, and the ones who know that map, it's 5 up triangles, 4 down triangles, 9 triangles superimposed to vibrate out the pattern, right? That the universe is mediated between between temperature, between seasons, between consciousness and unconsciousness, between center. The universe is bigger than just the polarities, right? And then, of course, once you understand 1 is like a house, well, then you can know that it holds a lot of things in it. So 1 house with all these parts in it. Okay? So I learned this magic square. I first saw it written as a Western magic square, and they use it in Feng Shui. It is the same thing as a compass: north, south, east, west, northeast, southwest, northwest, southeast, center. Right? Once you start realizing, oh, that's all. It's like saying, oh, it's a map, right? This is very basic, right, literacy things. But once you understand what is in it, then you can keep going deeper into it and understanding different codes. So here's things that I learned, and it's all in the front matter of this stuff. If you want to get to 9, which is your vision of achievement, which is your 3rd eye, which is you're feeling that the nth degree of accomplishment, right? Like I'm at, 9 parts to the whole, right? I'm right up there inside. Well, how do I get there? Right? Because everybody's trying to get there. Well, it's a math game. You can get there with 7 and 2. Because 7 and 2 will get you to 9. It will, right? So now you can sit there and go, well, what does that mean? Well, look up what 7 means. 7 means handling the world. 7 means competency. 7 is the West. 7 is when you make a business deal, you shake with that right hand. 7 belongs to, right? That's what a map is for. It tell you, what does that mean? It says, oh, it means, and it will tell you, right? So it's on the map, right? So I want you to understand that all you have to do is read the menu. I want this. Well, how do I get that? Well, the easiest way to get to 7 to 9 is 7 plus 2. 7 is competency. It is in the spirit game. It is on the second floor. 2 is a mind game, right? It is about setting your goals, knowing what you want, right? Remembering things. So if I took a block and I say, that's my goals, and I take my competency and I leverage it to hold up my block, well, 8 minutes later, my competency would have held up my block and I would have achieved something. 7 plus 2. It would have got me to 9. Okay? Now, tricks to know, because these are card games, because it's all about time, how you're not going to lose your mind, how you're going to handle time, how you're going to manipulate time. Well, know what time it is. Read clocks. Measure up. Right? So read clocks at day and night, read clocks at 24 hours, read clocks at the full year, read clocks at the season, right? Keep overlaying all your information, knowing that's your template of great nature. Then comes the personal, the dot that you put on the map. That's me, the dot, on my map. Okay? So when you're playing with grids, you're playing with maps. It's a template. And the big template is bottom, middle, top. Bottom is body, middle is spirit, top is mind. So mind, body, breath. That's your first way to divide anything. In a sense, bottom, middle, top. Bottom could be like the roots of a plant. Middle could be the leaves of the plant. And top could be the flower of the plant, the mind of the plant, the flourishing of the plant. Then you divide everything left, right, and center. So this is just, dividing space. East Coast, West Coast, North and South, right? And middle, right? America, okay? So East side, when we talk about the East, that's your heart. That's also your innocence, and that's your dawn, and that's where you wake up in the morning. And so another way to get to 9 is 4 plus 5. Wake up, know what you want, and put your heart in it. Right? That might get you there, especially if using techniques and remembering didn't get you there. Right? Because there's lots of ways to get to the same place, but you have to know it's all on the maps. Right? So I know where I live. I have one road I always take to get to Katonah, because it's the route I like the best. But say they're paving the road. Doesn't mean I can't get here. It means I should know that there are other roads. Right? So with a good map, you can know that there are other ways to get where you want. Right? Because it's not that people don't work hard. Sometimes there are roadblocks and it's just not the right way. Right? And how do you find out? Because nature doesn't care. But nature is very informative. So it's very helpful. They always say, if you die in nature, it's your fault, right? Because nature always gives you an out. It lets you know if you spit, you know the direction of water, right? If, you find a hovel, you should know, protect yourself from animals at night, right? Don't go out looking for your food at night. Right? There's enough clues that the better clued in you are, right, the more you can play with all this stuff. So, great nature, personal nature, dividing space. So when you divide space, bottom, middle, top, mind, body, breath, left, right, center. Left side is generally the dawn, the east. It's also, we call it the inheritance, right? So why do I define it this way? Because you can define anything once you've been someplace. So I might not draw the same picture of California as another map maker, but I've been to California and I studied California and I've been to certain places in California, so I can draw the map of that, right? So eventually the trick is overlay your maps, use cellos, right? Know that if you get a map of New York, well, somebody else might have the map of the subway system of New York. It should overlay, right? Because it's the same territory. So what is the territory that we're mapping? Mind, body, breath, inheritance, world, you dealing with what you were given and what the world expects of you, and how am I going to handle it all? right? And then the last division is not of space, it's of time. Potential, past, present, right? So now you have 9 ways to mediate things, to know, oh, everything has a body, everything has a spirit, everything is mind. Everything has an inheritance, everything has a world, and everything has a soul trying to figure out, how do I deal, right? And everything has its time, its future, its memories, its present. So every map is based on that, right? Then the numbers. So if you want to know what the numbers mean, they're not arbitrary, right? Which is why names can be arbitrary. So I'm thinking about, oh, I just shouldn't say it, right? Like the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf of America. Names can be arbitrary. You can change the names of things, but numbers are not arbitrary. 6 eggs in the container are 6 eggs in the container. And when you're talking about 6, you're talking about sex, right? So you don't put 6 up in your third eye. You put 6 down in the pelvic floor, right? Because it's very sexy. It's a portal of male and female superimposed, because 6 means sex, right? So it's very, it's got 2s and 3s and 3s and 2s, and it's all this gender stuff has moved through 6, right? So the numbers are not like names, right? They are coded to be in very specific places. If you're what's it called, an accountant, and you don't know where to place your numbers, you can end up in prison, right? You have to know where to put the numbers, what that means, right? Because everything has meaning. And that's why yoga is a form game, and form doesn't lie. It is very meaningful. Your job is extract a lot of meanings and then measure up and see what you want and see how your techniques can actually get you there. So the practicality of use a map, right? Plan your year. You can always change things. But if you don't plan, then all of a sudden you go, what happened to my year? Say, well, everyone gets 24 hours in a day. Use time to your advantage, because otherwise it is to your disadvantage, right? The big defeat in life is bitterness. You're bitterness when you worked hard and you didn't get what you want. So work hard and get what you want, right? In Buddhism, the term is called samma. Samma does not mean right or wrong. It means in summation. It's math. It has to add up. If your livelihood and your techniques don't eventually measure up, they're wrong, right? So asana means ease. It doesn't mean easy in the sense that it doesn't come hard, right? It belongs to that same concept as Wu Wei, right? Wu Wei means effortless effort, but to achieve Wu Wei, you have to go through Yu Wei, which is effortful effort, which means first you have to work real hard to become literate. Learn to read. And if you're dyslexic, get a nice teacher to help you. But everybody eventually can be learned to read. Everybody eventually can learn the 10. Because they're with you all the time to play with, right? So, yeah, right? So effortless effort, right? First you have to make tremendous effort to become effortless, right? So poses, the ease of a pose is really when the shoe fits, it's easy to wear it. Right? And that's why you have to size your poses so that eventually you fit. And then all of a sudden you have that ease that I can be in this body. So I want to break down a couple of concepts which I think are interesting to play with. When you play with your third eye, third hand, third foot, right, which is, the implicit, and you can see your right hand, and you can see your left hand. Left hand is 3, right hand is 7. 3 and 7 make 10, 2 ends of the pole, right? So that's when you can go, okay, one hand will be my pencil, other hand will be the eraser, and then when I want to be a lefty, left hand is my pencil, right hand is my eraser. Some things to know about polarities. Polarities are very edgy. They're always opposing each other because they're 2 ends of the same stick. They never can see each other, right? So you don't reconcile polarity. You mediate polarity, right? Because it's on the same stick. The pencil will never see the eraser, never see the pencil, but eventually, right, you can know a lot and understand, oh, now I'm the eraser and they're the pencil. Or now I'm the pencil, they're the eraser. So there is that. But to play with polarity, you're always playing with the third principle that you are mediating polarity. Okay? So right hand and left hand, third hand. Right foot, left foot, third foot. Right eye, left eye, third eye. When you play with the third foot, that is known as your soul. Right? So to be soulful is to be deep in a body. So the most soulful waters of your body is saliva, because you have to swallow it. right? So when you're asked to be soulful, you'll know you're being soulful because you have to swallow it. You just can't say it, right? And it's deep, and it's about you, and it's your well. And that's why, you always find the deep waters are minerals that are deep, earth deep, right? It's earthy. Second floor, which is your spirit, your third hand, is your spirit. Okay, so when you're talking about being spirited, you're really talking about your third hand. Okay, when you're being soulful, you're talking about your embodiment. It's very soulful to be in a body, especially if it's a body that you suffer with. So you have to know everyone suffers.
Could you repeat that? The difference between soul and spirit?
Yes, right. Now remember, this is all conception, so I can use names, but I'm going to give you my language, just like it's the Gulf of Mexico as opposed to the Gulf of America, or the Gulf of America, but right. But when someone talks about being soulful, they're really talking about going deep, right? And the deepest waters of your being is saliva, because it permeates everything in you, and it's yours alone. So to be soulful is to be in your body, right? It is about your suffering in the body. Spirit is the second floor, and that's why spirit belongs to the narrative of lungs, pneuma. Pneuma means spirit, and in Greek, when you have a problem with the spirit, it's called pneumatic, right? Pneumonia is a problem of your spirit, right? It's in the lungs, right? And all esoteric practice really begins in spirit, because it's autonomic, it's sympathetic, and it's shared with every creature on this planet. So the waters of your spirit is the ocean. Right? That's why when you get really spirited and you play really hard, you sweat salt, right? And you cry salt. And you go to the ocean to get buoyant. Feeds your spirit. So what feeds your soul? Food. Right? And that's why if your saliva tastes wrong to you, change what you eat. It's soulful. You have to swallow it. So when I drink too much coffee, my saliva tastes like coffee, right? When I eat really well, right, I swallow, and my juices that belong to me, right, have been fed differently than if I just drank. Yeah? The way you feed your spirit is applause, love. They love me, feeds my spirit. I'm loved. Makes my spirit feel great. So how do you get the applause? Learn how to play well. The better you play, the more people are going to want you on your team, the more it will feed your spirit. And that's why sports teams, when you go to sports match, it is collective spirit. It's very spiritual, right? Churches, it's spirit. It's really to love together, right? When you do Ujjayi, because we're going to start breath work in a minute, Ujjayi is the oceanic breath, and that is the breath really of the communal, of the spirit, because you're breathing the lithium of the ocean. You're breathing the waters of the planet, the tide going in and the tide going out. So the first breaths are always oceanic, so you can be fed, right, by the ocean, by our tides, which are controlled by the moons, and so they're on the calendars, right? Top floor is the mind, right? So third eye is your mind, third hand is your spirit, and third foot is your soul, right? They're all part of the same thing, and you can be soulful in your mind, and you can be spirited in your groin, right? Because every floor will have a bottom and a middle and a top, and everything is everywhere, but we're defining the character, right? So when you swallow it, guaranteed you're being soulful, right? When you do something that makes people applaud you and love you and makes your heart warm, feeds your spirit. And when you think well, it feeds your mind, right? So minds can be open, and they can be taught to process good food, right? Food for the mind is food for thought. Food for the spirit is good play, and food for the soul is nutrition, right? So that is a very big division that is played in all this. I want to say that about the waters and about soul, spirit, and mind. Okay. One other thing I want to say, and then we're going to do the practice. Okay. When you know numbers, right, here's a good thing to know, right? Because I told you about polarities. Polarities are always edgy. So if you take on a pen and you write on your fingers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the first 5 on the left hand the last 5 on the right hand. Well, you know the polarity of 1 is 9. You know the polarity of 2 is 8. If it was on your fingers, you would be able to, attach a string. Polarity of 3 is 7, polarity of 4 is 6, polarity of 5 is itself, right? So the first thing to know, as I said, is all polarities are always 2 ends of the same stick. They're edgy because they always have an angle. They don't see each other. Water does not see fire. But when they get together, they can make steam, they can put each other out, they can do all this stuff, right? The pencil is not the same thing as the eraser. But if you have both, you can write something and then you can erase it, right? You can write something and then you can write something again, right? So they're very playful with each other, right? So they can be very collaborative, right? But they're not the same. They'll never be the same when you're playing polarities. So always know when you're trying to find a polarity, just make it all add up to 10. So you can make a polarity from 2 plus 3 plus 5. You can make a polarity from 7 plus 3. Then when you know what the numbers mean, then you'll know why that's polarized, right? So polarity of left hand is the right hand. Well, left hand in old cultures is what you clean yourself with, and right hand is what you eat with. And why? So that you eventually don't have infections and die, right? So very practical, right? To know what's the polarity of night, day, what's the polarity of being alive, dying, what's the polarity of being young, old, what's the polarity of summer, winter. Always edgy, always has angles. So pick your polarities and then read about them and know, if I'm so invested in this, what's the polarity of this, that, this and that. The next big maps, and so this is what I've been playing with, next big maps are the big maps of reconciliation, right? So first you learn the grid so that you can find the center, which is 5. It's about me in the middle of up and down, left and right, sleeping and waking, summer and winter. And then I'm in the middle of all of it. So that's how you find the crossroads, me in the middle. Then all of a sudden polarity moves to Trinity, and it's all about knowing those triangles that I can mediate. I can mediate between winter and summer. 5 is great mediation. Right? So once you have that, then you start on the next big game, which is called reconciliation. Right? And reconciliation is not the same thing as mediation. So you have to know you're going to be playing with the exact same ingredients, the numbers, but now rather than trying them to get them to add up to 10 and to give you poles and eventually 15 to give you triangles, what you're really going to try to do is reconcile and find 5 in the middle. And 5 is the spirit of love in the middle. So how do you find 5? If this is 1, I know this is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, 6 minus 1 is going to get me to 5. 7 minus 2 is going to get me to 5. 8 minus 3 is going to get me to 5. 9 minus 4 is going to get me to 5. 10 minus 5 gets me to 5. So all of a sudden, the mudra of prayer is the easiest way to find love, to find 5. So what is prayer as opposed to polarity? It's self-reflection by seeing yourself in the other. So my thumb on my left hand can see my thumb on the right hand. Well, if I consume, right, 6 minus 1, well, that's going to lead me to 5, right? But if I radiate, it's going to lead me to 7. My production in the world, right? So a math game. That's all I want you to just know. Every mudra is a math game. Once you can code your numbers, you know what your mudra means, right? Because otherwise, it doesn't mean anything except that you learn how to make a shape, right? But you didn't make a shape to make a shape. You made a shape to make a function, right? So why do you pray? To collapse the polarities into 2 great polarities, right hand, left hand, me and you, this and that. And then say, but they look so much alike, even though it's not me, it's that, right? So easiest way to eventually not play for mediation is reconciliation, right? See yourself in the other, that whole self-reflective game, right? So that is coded in all these maps. You will now see them and they'll make a little more sense, but really the rest of it's just a map, right? Or rather a calendar, which I love because I put everything on my calendar, right? Years ago, I decided I was going to do a certain practice every day or as many days as I could. And in the practice, there were 10 wheels, right? And it only counted if I did the 10 wheels in the practice. And so every time I did it, I would make a little star on my calendar, right? And then at the end of the year, I counted. So I did 2,220 wheels in that year because I did it 220 days. The next year, I couldn't do a wheel. I still can't do a wheel. Right? So you win some, you lose some, right? It's like, wow, look at that. But and one last thing, then we're going to start the practice. The idea of remembering and forgetting. It is very important in all techniques to know what to remember and what to forget, right? Because the goal of these practices is to help you not lose your mind in a body, right? And it's very hard not to lose mind because there's lots of things that your mind can think about and be occupied with. And remember, one's being an eraser while another one's being a pencil. So, what the eraser's feeling is not what the pencil was doing. It's everyone's having their own stuff. So you have to know what to remember and what to forget. It's very good to codify things so that you don't have to remember too much. So if you make a lot of plans, put it on a calendar. You don't have to remember, but you have to remember that you put it down, right? So this is part of measuring up, right? Because if you don't show up 4 times, you will not be invited again. Then your spirit will not be fed, right? If you bake the cake, but you don't check recipes and you don't calibrate ovens and you don't check your proportions and it comes out terrible, too bad. Right? Which is why nothing is a judgment, but it is very powerful to know that you can. Right? When I do body reading stuff, for me the big game is, or when I'm watching somebody do a pose, I know everything they've ever done has gotten them there. It's pretty good to get as far as one gets, right? But to get to the next place, there always has to be something else, and that's why the artists always figure out what else can we do now so that you can get to the next place. Right? Because it takes a lot of work to get this far. Right? So I think great time management, great orientation, coding numbers, having good techniques, knowing you have 24 hours a day. You're not asked to have techniques that you have to do 24 hours in a day. But if you can add 20 minutes of this and 10 minutes of that and, ritualized time, that's the great fire rituals. That's where you're figuring out, how do I maintain my fires? Fire of desire, fire of speech, and fire of mind. So, okay, with all that said, let's do a practice.